All right, in this lesson, I'll introduce the AG method, which allows us to call different aggregation methods on the columns within our data frame. So let's begin by executing our code. There we can see a preview of our first 3 rows of fortune, and the AG method is going to be called directly on our group by object, which is stored in the sectors variable. So let's begin with sectors.ag, and then I'm going to open my parentheses to indicate a method. So usually we've been doing something like calling the method collectively. So for example, I've done something like sectors.mean, and that took the average for every numeric column that was available, the average for revenue, profits, and employees as a whole. I also was able to extract an independent column like, let's say, employees, and then get the mean just for that. And what the AG method allows us to do is to get the best of all worlds. We can specify the column and what operation we want to perform on it. And that allows us to perform completely different operations on each. So for example, if I want to sum up the values in my revenue and profits column for each grouping, while performing an average or mean calculation for the employees column among each grouping, what I can do is use the AG method. What it expects is a Python dictionary, which of course is indicated by a pair of curly braces. And in this dictionary, we want to use a column name as a key, and after the colon, we want to provide the method or operation that we want to aggregate on as the value. So for example, if I want to perform a sum aggregation on my revenue column, I could write revenue as my key, a colon, which is the default syntax in a dictionary to connect a key to a value, and then the name of the aggregation method, which is sum. I'm then going to put a comma to move on to the very next combination, and at this point I can also create a line break. There will be no errors when we execute. So let's say for my profits column, I also want to do sum, so I'm going to write profits, which matches my column name right here, then a colon, and again in quotes the name of the method that I want to apply, which is sum. Now, of course, if I want to include the employees column, I just add another comma and write employees. And let's say for employees, I want to do a completely different aggregation. I want to take the mean or the average. Now I could write mean, and so what it's going to do is perform a unique aggregation process on each column depending on what command it gets here from this dictionary. So now you'll see the results in the revenue and profits column are going to have the sums or the totals for those groupings, while the values in the employees column are going to have the averages or means of the employees for the companies in that grouping or in that sector. Now let's do a slightly different example. Let's provide a list of values to the AG method. That's the opposite thing that we can give it. So in this one, we specified a specific operation that we wanted to apply to every column. Now let's say we want to apply multiple operations to multiple columns. So for example, if I do sectors.ag and I open the parentheses, let's say I want to apply not just one operation like we would do, sum or mean. Let's say to each column, revenue, profits, and employees, I want to take the size, I want to take the sum, and I want to take the mean. Now what I can do here is put a list and write in size, sum, mean. And so there's 3 columns times 3 operations. So when I aggregate this, I'm going to get 9 total columns. And you can see for each of those 3 columns, I have them up top as the top level of my columns index. And then for each, I have a calculation. So for example, I have 20 companies that fall into the aerospace and defense sector. The sum of their revenues is 357,940, and the average of their revenue is 17,897. And then I repeat the process for profits and employees. And of course, you'll see in this case the size is going to be the same, exact same for each. But this might change if we have something like null values. But the more important calculations, which are things like sum and mean, are now separated for those 3 columns and calculated in a single data frame. So we've performed a massive calculation process with just a single line of code. We've taken the sum and mean of every sector within our original fortune data frame by just grouping and calling this AG method. So the AG method is basically just an aggregator. It accepts either a dictionary where we specify what we want to aggregate each column by, Or it can take something like a list where it applies it to every single column and just applies that operation as it loops through these columns. And of course, what we can do here is combine these two together. So for example, if I wanted to take revenue here and I wanted to give it a list, like I want the sum and the mean for the revenue, and only the sum for the profits, and only the mean for the employees, I can execute this, and you'll see for each one it's going to separate them. For revenue, because I gave it a list, it's going to do both sum and mean. For profits, since I gave it a single string value, it's only going to do sum. And for employees, it's going to calculate the average or mean of the number of employees in each group because I only gave it a single string argument. So you can mix and match these two designs to specify what columns you want to apply operations on, what combination of operations you want to apply these methods on, and so on. So that's just a quick introduction to the AG method. There's a lot more that you can do with it, but this hopefully will just get the brain juices flowing to give you a general sense of how quickly you can aggregate and summarize the information that's contained within a data frame through the group by object.